Hello everyone, this is my book summary of Iron Kingdom. It is a book about Prussia, this one right here, and it is Iron Kingdom, The Rise and Downfall of Prussia, 1600 to 1947. A brilliant book, my personal favorite book, history book, sorry, and I think the best history book on Prussia. Chapter 1. Now, in the start, Brandenburg was not exactly the best place. It had terrible geography, it was forested, it was sandy, and Nicholas Leutinger said it was flat land, wooded, and for the most part swamp. It was certainly not blessed by geography. Its soil that it could use was poor, and in an agrarian world, this was a terrible thing. Berlin was described as vast regions of bare and burning sand. Now, Brandenburg didn't have the same geographical advantages of, say, Italy. It was a purely political entity, and its land seized, and the lands that were settled were seized by German expansion east against the Slavs. In the people and Brandenburg, was settled by people all over Western Europe. In fact, there were still some Slavs in the villages of Spreewald. Now another disadvantage, you're going to see lots of disadvantages of Prussia. It had very poor transport. It had no ports. It had no ports on the Baltic Sea, nor on the North Sea. And the rivers that flowed through Berlin, the capital, didn't connect to either another big river or to the Baltic Sea. The two rivers that flowed through Brandenburg, the Oder and the Elbe, were both on the edges of Brandenburg. Its transport was very primitive, and in this age of water transport, not having good ports or good water access, and this was very bad for civilization. Now another thing was that Brandenburg was far away from the major economic centers of Germany. It lacked the wine trade, it lacks the flax trade, the wool trade in the Netherlands, and the silk trade, for example. It didn't have minerals like iron or silver, and the iron it had was pretty poor quality. It was quite poor compared to its southern neighbor Saxony, its northern neighbor Sweden, and obviously the very mercantile Republic of the Netherlands. By the 30 Years' War, in the early 1600s, Berlin only had 10,000 people. London, however, had 130,000. Dynasty. The Hohenzollerns, the people who ruled Prussia, or Brandenburg now, were from Franconia, which is modern-day northwestern Bavaria. In 1417, Frederick Hohenzollern, the Burgrave of Nuremberg, bought Brandenburg from the Holy Roman Emperor for 400,000 Hungarian gold guilders, quite a lot of money. But not only did he buy just a lot of territory, he also bought a lectorship. This was very prestigious, as the Holy Roman Empire only had 7 electors. So being an elector made you join an exclusive group of princes. Now the Holy Roman Empire was big and diverse. It was a survival of the medieval era, and it was famously not really an empire. We all know the quote saying it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But it is not an empire in the modern English sense. It covered 300 sovereign territories, and some were ruled by margraves, some by burgraves, some by bishops, some by archbishops, some by dukes, some by counts. It was a very dynamic landscape. And the Holy Roman Emperor, who was technically in charge, rule was quite weak. As said, it was a very fluid system. In everything in the HRE, there was negotiation and bargaining. Nothing that the emperor said was taken as it was. Now the Holy Roman Empire had Germans, French Walloons, Flemings, Danes, Czechs, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Italians, and the Holy Roman Emperor was chosen, like I said, by 7 electors. And these 7 electors could technically choose anyone that was of noble birth, but in reality from 1415 onwards it was almost always occupied by the incest-loving Habsburgs, and these Habsburgs were the most wealthy family in Germany by far. They controlled Austria, they controlled the Netherlands, or at the height, sorry, they controlled Hungary, they controlled Spain, they controlled a lot of land. The electorship title was also important as it allowed a very unique sense of diplomacy that none of the other princes could have. They could bargain for concessions, and they could get bribed to vote for somebody, which is a nice source of revenue. And if you ever played Brandenburg in EU4, Europa Universalis 4, you might have gotten the event, the Sposatio Aquilia. Now this secured father-son primogeniture until Joachim I, when he split his territory between two sons. But luckily the youngest son died before that happened. This was a very common thing. Separation was extremely common from father to multiple sons in medieval Germany. Now, religion. In 1520s and 30s, Lutheranism became very popular. This was known as the Reformation Age, and a lot of princes, wanting more independence from the emperor, became Lutheran. 2/5 of the free cities were the independent city-states in the empire, became Lutheran. And Holy Roman Emperor Charles V of Austria and Spain, wanting to maintain Catholic integrity of the Holy Roman Empire, fought Lutherans. In 1555, in the Diet of Augsburg, it said that the princes could either be Catholic or Lutheran and impose religious uniformity unto their subjects. Now, the Hohenzollerns, back to them, were quite slow to become Lutheran. They wanted to stick to the emperor's good side, and this is a very common theme of the Hohenzollerns being split between multiple foreign policies. You'll see that later. Joachim II in 1535 Joachim II, who ruled from 1535 to 71, converted to Lutheranism. He tried to play both sides and even helped the emperor against Lutherans in the Schmalkaldic War. And another thing to mention was the Hohenzollerns were very good at marriage diplomacy. Most importantly and most famously, they inherited the Duchy of Prussia, which was ruled by another branch of Hohenzollerns, and Jülich Cleve. But these new territories also gave way to new problems. The Duchy of Prussia was not in the HRE and was not connected to Brandenburg. Jülich Cleve was also not connected, they were in the west. And Poland technically ruled the Duchy of Prussia, which made some weird power dynamic where the elector of Brandenburg was ruled not only by the Holy Roman Emperor, but also by the Polish king. Now, Jülich Cleve was in a conflict zone between the Dutch Republic and the Spanish. They were having their own thing going on between each other. And Duchy of Prussia was also in another conflict zone, but this one between the emerging Swedes and Poland. And like many other European princes, the elector shared power with the estates. Now the estates, again, if you played EU4, these are the various people who hold land. You have the church holding their lands, the clergy they're called. You have the nobility, which, well, in this era was extremely important. The nobility was probably stronger than the elector itself. And then you had the merchants in town, they're called the burghers. And the elector had to share power between all of them. So, like the Holy Roman Emperor, like the Holy Roman Empire, it was a very fluid dynamic system when no one really ruled absolutely. This was not the age of absolutism yet. Now Brandenburg had a marriage alliance with the Calvinist Duke Palatinate and the Dutch Republic. Now the Calvinists were a very extreme branch of Protestantism, and if you recall, in the Diet of Augsburg in 1555, it said that Lutherans and Catholics can impose their confessions onto their subjects, but it did not protect Calvinists. So aligning with Calvinists was an interesting idea, because these Calvinists were the enemies of the emperor. Now, religious tensions were simmering. Protestant and the Catholic leagues were formed, and in 1613 the Elector converted to Calvinism, a very big deal. And despite the Protestant Union withdrawing support from Brandenburg, despite this, Protestant Union withdrew support from Brandenburg and withdrew support of all of Brandenburg's territorial claims. It no longer was protected by the Augsburg Diet of 1555. Now, understandably so, this excited outrage among the Lutheran population of Brandenburg. And the Elector, who was once strong and determined, became a bit of a drunk. He grew obese and ruined a marriage alliance by punching his would-be son-in-law. He even had a stroke that left him in really bad shape, and he was described in 1618 as Leben dictat, suspended between life and death. So Brandenburg, by this stage, was in bad political shape. How could it defend its territories when no one supported them? Now, another thing was that Brandenburg had very meager amount of money, so they couldn't pay for mercenaries like that was common. So how could they exert this power? By 1618, despite the diplomacy on each side, the Holy Roman Empire was on the brink of a religious and dynastic war called the 30 Years' War. Thank you.